Apology for Murder from 1945 was a crime movie that tells the story of an ordinary man who falls for a lovely yet scheming woman, and together they plot to kill her wealthy husband, making it look like an accident in order to run off together with the money. And hey, Rob, that sounds an awful lot like the plot of the film Double Indemnity, the Billy Wilder film that came out just a year previously. And okay, yes, this is a very familiar feeling crime film starring Hugh Beaumont and Anne Savage. And reading a lot of the reviews for this one, it included the term ripoff and remake and things like that. So yes, this is a very similar film, but yet I did still find it entertaining in its own way. So what I'm going to do, objectively, is take a look at this film, give it an overview, spoiler-free, and then offer some thoughts on this one, and maybe go beyond just seeing this film as just a ripoff. Well, the film opens up, and we have newspaper reporter Kenny Blake, played by Hugh Beaumont, yes, of Leave It to Beaver fame, and he works for the Daily Tribune, and he is off to try to interview businessman Harvey Kirkland, played by actor Russell Hicks. Now, while he is there at his place, he checks out a lovely woman who is sitting in a chair near him, kind of idly kicking her foot, and who catches his attention. Well, this is Anne Savage as the character Tony Kirkland, who Kenny initially mistakes as this old guy's daughter. Well, because he's old and she's young and lovely. But no, this is actually his wife. Well, Henry returns to his newspaper, and he's told off by his editor, Ward McKee, played by actor Charles Brown, because he didn't get the interview, but his editor seems to put up with his shenanigans. Now, a little bit later, Tony meets up with Kenny, and they go for a drive, and almost right away, the two of them seem to be romantically involved together, just like that. And she is able to cast her spell on this poor sap, and when she reveals that her husband isn't willing to divorce her because of this refusal to give her an appropriate settlement, it's here that Tony asks Kenny if he will help her to kill him. Well, Kenny initially refuses, of course, but she later convinces him with a little bit of sugar, and also by lying that her husband is now planning to divorce her using perjured testimony. So we get into their grand scheme to kill Harvey. Tony calls him, saying that her car has broken down on an isolated road and that she needs his help. Now here there's a brief, lighthearted scene with this yokel character, Jed, played by actor Bud Buster, who manages to break down right in the vicinity of where they are planning their murder, but he gets out with the "aw shucks," and fixes his car and then moves on his way. Well, it's around here that Harvey shows up and finds his wife and questions her about what's going on. And it's here that Kenny sneaks up behind him and clobbers the guy with a wrench. The murder is done, so then they push Harvey's car with him in it over a cliff to make it appear like it was an accident. So back at his office, Kenny seems to just kind of be in a daze, and the editor Ward is just thinking that he's hungover, but he gives him the ironic task of writing the news report about the death of Harvey Kirkland. Well, he meets with the police lieutenant and finds out that this is actually being investigated as a murder, not as an accident as they had planned. So what happens here is that Kirkland's caregiver, Craig Jordan, actor Pierre Watkin, he is actually accused of the crime because earlier he had been overheard fighting with Kirkland, and he had made a remark about wanting to kill him, which he didn't really mean, but he was just angry. But that is enough, I suppose, to make him a suspect. Now, Kenny isn't happy about this because the guy's innocent, but Tony is just kind of callous and tells Kenny things like, "Are you turning out to be a jellyfish?" She tells him that we're in this together, and Kenny is starting to realize that he is really in over his head. Now, Kenny's editor Ward starts to investigate the murder himself because it doesn't seem to fit right with him. He questions the local rancher's wife, who tells him that she saw a stranger on the road the day that Harvey Kirkland had died. Well, Ward goes to question Tony about his hunch as well, But she maintains her innocence, of course. But once alone again, when Kenny and Tony can talk, she's starting to become upset because she has learned that Kirkland had left the bulk of his estate to charity. So she wants to contest the will, which causes Kenny to question if she really loves him at all or if she's all just about the money. This poor guy, he's crazy for her, but we start to see her real character here. What I did for you, baby, is what he says. But around here, wouldn't you know it, another guy shows up. This is Alan Webb, played by Norman Willis. Now, he's a lawyer who's going to work with her to help her contest the will. Kenny leaves, thinking this is all a big mistake. And once Tony is alone with Alan, well, wouldn't you know it, she starts getting all cozy with him. Well, back at work at the newspaper, the character Jed shows up again and tells Ward that he has found tire tracks and footprints to support the story that the rancher's wife had given, all of which build on Ward's suspicions that Tony and an unknown character were responsible for the murder. Kenny listens to this as Ward says, "We're closing in." And, Kenny's starting to worry, calls to tell Tony, but he can't reach her. Well, because she's a vixen and she has set her eyes on this lawyer character. And eventually Kenny learns about her new interest, and he's distraught. So these two are in trouble, and Ward is continuing with his driven investigation. And with not much of the film left, what will happen? Well, I'm not going to give away the ending. You need to see this one for yourself. No spoilers. As far as I can tell, this one is in the public domain. And this would seem to be the case because all of the copies I found online are in pretty bad shape. So you can go find the movie for yourself to see how this one ends. But let me offer some closing thoughts on this one. Apology for Murder was released in 1945. It was directed by Sam Newfield. He's a prolific director. He's worked on a number of films I've reviewed on this channel. The production company, Producers Releasing Corporation, PRC, one of Hollywood's Poverty Row studios, they were the ones responsible for this film. And they had originally wanted to call the film, get this, Single Indemnity. I don't know. Well, Paramount Pictures, the production company behind Double Indemnity, as you can guess, they heard of this and did not approve, and they obtained an injunction that barred the film's original release under that title. So PRC instead, understandably, went with a different title, Apology for Murder. However, other working titles for this film were Her Last Mile and Highway to Hell. Okay, here are my thoughts on this film, though. Okay, you can go into this one just expecting a Double Indemnity ripoff, as many reviews put it, and yes, there are many similarities. One I picked up on, and actually I think it's kind of funny, is how both of the films feature actors who are known for playing wholesome TV dads. I mean, think about it. Double Indemnity had Fred McMurray from My Three Sons, and Apology for Murder has Hugh Beaumont of Leave It to Beaver fame. So there's that. But I am going to argue that I do think that there were some notable differences. And yes, let's get this out of the way. Both feature a guy who falls for a lovely but manipulative woman. Both feature a carefully staged murder set up to look like an accident. Both feature a guy who's clearly fallen for a dubious, manipulative woman, not really in love with him. And both feature someone driven to investigate because things don't seem to line up. So yes, clearly there are some strong similarities between Double Indemnity and Apology for Murder. I'm not denying it. But at the same time, with Apology for Murder, I felt that there were some good positives to help this one stand out on its own. First, while no one is going to top Barbara Stanwyck as that amazing femme fatale of Double Indemnity, there was a lot I still enjoyed about Anne Savage in her similar role in this film. She's gorgeous and manipulative, and if you've seen her in the film Detour, you know that she can excel at playing a nasty character who can turn on a moment. 1 minute tender and sweet, and the next just vicious with eyes flashing. And she is really great in this role as a manipulator, and in her own way, I saw different than Stanwyck's version of the character. And there I go. It's like I'm talking about this film almost like it's a remake. It's not, but it kind of feels like it could be, Hugh Beaumont is someone most people think of as Ward Cleaver. wholesome TV dad, obviously, but I've actually seen him in a number of non-Leave It to Beaver roles. Old cinema of the 40s, notably when he played gumshoe detective Michael Shane, when he took over this character from Lloyd Nolan in the mid-1940s in that particular series of films. So that's already showed me that he can act in less than wholesome roles convincingly. I've even seen him play the bad guy in a few films, so there's that. But to me, I thought he was great in this film because there's a tragic sense to his performance when he realizes that, yeah, he's been used. You really feel the hopelessness of his betrayal, and you see his face distraught and shadow. The man realizes he's basically doomed. And I thought Hugh Beaumont did a great job with their performance. At one point, he's idly sketching a hangman's noose while sitting at his desk. So the performance by the leads in this film, I thought were very well done. And in thinking about it, another difference is that this is a shorter film as well, which is both good and bad. The story unfolds at a good, brisk pace, and it keeps you invested. But the negative of going shorter is that, to me, it did feel like the relationship between Tony and Kenny was on far too quickly, maybe not convincingly enough, and maybe it could have used just a little more development. Thinking again of Double Indemnity and of Billy Wilder's fascinating detailed storytelling in that film, there's the scene of Walter talking with Phyllis about insurance, and that's a scene rich with flirtation and foreshadowing of possible murder. And I thought it really built the core of their relationship in that particular film. I just never really got that same strong emotional connection with the characters of Apology for Murder. Again, the shorter runtime probably meant less time to develop their relationship. And who knows, maybe if it was a slightly longer film, that might have helped a little bit. So my suggestion would be this. Go out and watch Double Indemnity first. It's $4 to rent it on Prime or go out and buy it and enjoy that Billy Wilder masterpiece. I love that film. After you've seen it, and if you're feeling daring, come back and check out Apology for Murder. You might walk away thinking it's just a straight-up copy or retelling of that first film. And yes, admittedly, the similarities are undeniable, but you can also go into this and try to appreciate Apology for Murder for what it is and give some attention to those great performances and take away from it what you can. Look, when I do this channel, I always try to look on the bright side of old films. And I do think that Apology for Murder is worth a watch, even if it can feel like a copy. Anne Savage and Hugh Beaumont both did a fine job in the film. And in light of everything I've said here, I would still argue that it's a decent film and it's one worth checking out.